On the internet, in conversations, on television, on the radio, it's always the same question: who won at the summit, and what does it mean for us, and who came out defeated, and so on. I don't know. In some movie, a completely minor passing character said a remarkable phrase. The conversation was between two Jews, and he said the following: politics, schmalitics. But how will this affect us, the Jews? I'm not sure these were the exact words, but that was the meaning. That's when I realized something important. People are truly concerned and interested not in the events themselves, but in how those events will affect them. So let's analyze world events from the perspective of how they will affect us. Dear friends, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Numerous events occurred this past week, each worthy of its own episode. Viewed together, however, they form a perceptible picture. You might not notice it if you look at them separately. Today, there are sort of 5 closely connected topics, so 5 plus 1. The most important one is Beijing, of course. Who won at the Trump-Xi summit? And what was said there that people in Moscow are rereading today with far more anxiety than any news from recent months. The second one: Israel eliminated the head of the Hamas military wing. His name is Izzadin al-Haddad, one of the last surviving architects of October 7th. I emphasize one of the last. What do you think happened to the previous ones? Third, this is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is not just capturing ships and firing at them now. They started deliberately spilling oil into the waters of the Gulf. Why? And who is he targeting, first of all? And fourth, America is running out of what the military calls hardware. Not oil, not dollars then. Interceptors, Patriot missiles, THAAD, precision strike. Almost half of their strategic stockpiles are gone. And it doesn't take months to replenish that, it takes years. Fifth, the latest polls. Disapproval of Trump in his second term has reached record highs or lows. I don't know how to put it. On the economy, 70% are against him. So even if the Democrats pick this up, what is he going to do about it? And he will. Don't worry, he will do something about it. And before we move on to the topics, that very statement from Beijing, which is worth pausing for, in the Great Hall of the People, it was announced there, the Grand Kremlin Hall. A formula was announced. Trump said it: the United States and China, the most important and the most powerful countries in the world. Together we can do a lot. We don't need to involve anyone else for this. Big and kind. And for our two countries, and for the whole world, I emphasize. Together, we don't need to involve anyone. We are not going to. She did not object. She responded in the same manner. The common interests between China and the U.S. outweigh our disagreements. Wonderful. When we cooperate, both sides benefit. When we confront each other, both sides suffer. We should be partners, not adversaries. Gentlemen, let it be clear. These were not spontaneous statements. These speeches were written, checked, approved. Consultations were held, among other things. How do you feel about us saying this? And if the other side says something, then we say that, and de facto we confirm it, and so on. And everyone heard it. Everyone understands how this is done. Everyone understands that this was agreed upon in advance. 2 countries in the world. Not 3, not 5. 2. They got the message in the Kremlin. They got the message in Brussels. They got the message in Delhi. Because the formula means a simple thing: the rest play by our rules. We will decide how the world lives, no matter how hard you try. My dear tryhards, Russia, which spent 20 years building a multipolar world, called itself a great power. With this phrase, it was shown its new place. Basically, it got slapped in the face. Not on par with China. Definitely not on par with America. Somewhere in line there, right? That's where we'll start. 2 leaders. When television cameras show the handshake between the 2 presidents, the room falls silent. Commentators talk about tense negotiations, about difficult compromises, about how much will be decided in these very hours and minutes. Newspapers come out with headlines like "The Fate of the World," right in these hands. Social networks explode, experts make predictions, and almost all of it misses the point. Because by the time the 2 leaders shake hands, everything has already been decided, long ago. How does it work? Let's take any major meeting of the past decades. Several months before it, work begins that no one sees. Technical teams, dozens of people from both sides, meet in neutral locations, sometimes in third countries, sometimes in hotels without signs. They work with documents, numbers, and wording. Every word is weighed, every comma is discussed. Then the ministers get involved. Then the leaders' advisors get involved. Then the leaders themselves receive the final folders, which say, "Here is what we propose. Here is what they are ready to accept. Here are the disagreements that we agreed to leave until the next round." By the time the leader's plane takes off, it's not that he really wonders what we'll agree on there. He knows the outcome of the meeting, down to the last detail. No leader of a major power goes to a meeting without knowing how it will end. Well, except for one we know. That wouldn't be diplomatic. That would be a gamble. And gambles at this level are too costly. Beijing, May 2026. Trump arrived in Beijing with an army of CEOs and presidents, Musk, Jensen Huang, the heads of the largest American corporations. The television footage was flawless. Military honors, children with flags, state banquet, a toast to health. Commentators immediately began counting winners and losers. Some said Trump got fewer planes than he wanted. That means he lost. Others said he gave in on trade, so he lost. Still others argued that the negotiations reached a deadlock over Taiwan, Ukraine, and Iran. Everyone was watching the footage. No one was looking at the mechanics, and the mechanics are as follows. In the months leading up to the Beijing summit, Treasury Secretary Besant and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng were meeting and working together. The final technical meeting took place in South Korea, where the official wording was agreed upon. Overall, the results were balanced and positive. So, by the time Trump boarded Air Force One, the documents were ready. All that was left was to sign them. What did they agree on what really matters to both sides? The tariffs are not increasing. Trade continues. Channels of exchange are expanding. On Taiwan, Ukraine, Iran, status quo. Can you say that nothing has changed? Yes, that is the agreement. Nothing has changed. No one is stoking conflicts because bigger conflicts are in no one's interest. Both countries want predictability. Both want to trade. Both want the Strait of Hormuz to remain open, not because they're good Samaritans, because oil goes through it, and everyone needs it. That is the real result. 200 planes. 500 planes. That's not the point. Ugly words. In a fantastic future, together. And a quiet, pragmatic architecture of stability, built long before the cameras started filming these very handshakes. A few minutes without cameras. But there is one moment in any major meeting, usually just one, the one that's truly unpredictable, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows it. These are those few minutes when the two leaders are alone, just them and the interpreter. No advisors, no protocol, no recording devices. Well, at least none that are visible. In Beijing, it was the moment when Trump, Xi, and Xi's daughter, who acted as the interpreter, went together to a place where there were no cameras. What happened there? No one knows. The interpreter will remain silent. It's part of the profession. Both leaders will say what they consider necessary. After they decide what needs to be said, the rest will stay between them. It is during these few minutes that what diplomats call a personal channel takes place. Things can be said there that will never make it into any documents. Understanding can be reached there, which cannot be put down on paper, which changes the approach. There, two people look each other in the eye and decide, well, whether they can trust each other. Not the state or the system, but each other personally. This is what our ally completely missed. Maybe because Trump is from a different generation. Maybe because Trump doesn't do coke or smoke. Maybe for some other reasons. But this mutual understanding, mutual sympathy, or mutual respect, it's not necessary to have sympathy. Unfortunately for Ukraine, this didn't happen at all. And this is, after all, the oldest mechanism of diplomacy. It existed when czars met on bridges over rivers that divided their kingdoms. It exists today. It hasn't gone anywhere, and it will always exist. Because no document can replace the moment when one person looks another in the eyes and tries to understand, tries to decide something in his own mind. Alaska. Let's recall another episode. Trump and Putin, a limousine in Alaska, literally a minute breaking all protocols. No advisors, no official interpreters, just the two of them and the driver, possibly someone who understands both languages. The whole world was discussing it. What did they talk about there? What was decided? Who outplayed whom? The right question would be different. Why did this even happen at all? Why break protocol for just 1 minute? The answer is simple, because sometimes you need to say something that can't be said officially, not written down. Something, let's call it personal. Personal not in that sense, but something else. Something that needs to be said, but can't be. Something that creates understanding between two people. Not between two states, but exactly between two people. This understanding then influences the decision, unofficially, informally, but really. It influences. World domination. Now about China. Because it's important to say directly what many people hesitate to put into words. So far, there is no evidence that China wants to take over the world. That sounds strange compared to what we hear every day. But let's look at the facts. Over 5,000 years of Chinese history, approximately. Despite the power of the Chinese empires, despite all their capabilities, China has never tried to conquer the whole world, not because it couldn't, because that's not part of the Chinese civilizational model. I'm saying strange things, right? Let me tell you an amazing story that might somehow explain China to you, what I'm trying to say now. The beginning of the 15th century. How long before Columbus? About 60 years. Europe is just a small peninsula on the edge of Eurasia, and at that very time, China was building a fleet like the world had never seen before, and probably wouldn't see again for 300 years. Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim, a eunuch who served at the court of Emperor Yongle, 7 expeditions. In the Great Expedition, there were 300 ships, up to 28,000 people on board. The ships were over 100 meters long. Can you imagine that? The best navigation in the world at that time. The magnetic compass, which had already been used in China for 4 centuries by then. How far did they go? As far as Malindi, that's present-day Kenya, as far as Mogadishu, as far as Arabia, as far as the Persian Gulf, as far as India, as far as Southeast Asia. And now the most interesting part, what were they doing there? Nothing. That's right, nothing. Nothing like what Europeans would have done there. Nothing. They didn't conquer, they didn't build forts, they didn't claim the land as their own, they didn't bring governors, they didn't leave garrisons, they brought gifts, they received gifts. They showed that China was big, rich, and cultured. Then they returned home. And then that's all. Emperor Yongle died. His son said, "That's enough, enough." Then the son died, the grandson. He allowed one more expedition. They came back. He said, "No, that's it. We're done." The ships were burned. The ships were burned. Well, some of them had rotted a bit, something else. They were burned. And 40 years later, the Minister of War, Liu Kaxia, took the expedition archives, maps, journals, reports, and burned them. Down to the last sheet. Why? He said it was so that future generations wouldn't repeat this foolishness. Foolishness. No heroism, no magnificence, no deed. Nonsense. What would we do there? We haven't even figured things out here yet. Do you want to compare? In the same century, the Spanish and Portuguese will set out into the ocean and build empires on 3 continents in just 100 years. The English, Dutch, and French will follow. Every European maritime power, once they reached new shores, kept going further, colonizing, raising their flags, every single one of them, without a single exception. China? That never happened in history. They looked and returned. That's the real Chinese psychology, not the one they show us today, but the real one. Millennia old. So that they don't repeat this foolishness, we got there. We saw it. We don't need it. We returned home. This is exactly the psychology Xi brought to Beijing for that meeting with Trump. Not to conquer the world, but leave us alone. In our zone. We'll leave you alone in yours. Do you understand this? It means knowing who we're dealing with. Expecting China to do something it's never done in 5,000 years shows a lack of understanding. That doesn't mean they won't set you up. That doesn't mean they won't try to take away your mineral resources or something else. China wants to be the most important, the most respected, the richest. It wants everyone to come to it to trade, to learn to ask. This is dominance, yes, but it's a different model. Dominance, not military. It's economic, cultural, any kind you like, but not with guns. But as for us, say the Chinese, do we have guns? Yes, we do. If necessary, we'll use them. But they already burned 300 ships once. That's exactly why Xi in Beijing told Trump, we need strategic stability, not victory. Not the enemy's surrender, stability. Predictability, the ability to plan years ahead. And right now, that's what Trump wants too. Not because they're buddies, but because their interests coincide. Both countries want to trade. Both want their economies to grow. Both understand that a war between them would be a disaster for our countries and for the whole world. Spheres of influence? Yes. Competition? Yes. You hurt me here, I'll respond there? Yes, but not war, not destruction, because that's not beneficial to anyone. If you think about it a little, you'll remember how the first president of the United States of America, George Washington, put it in his will. Exactly that. The formula. And here's the most interesting part. When Trump said the two most important and powerful countries in the world, and Xi agreed, they formally established what is called the G2 in world politics. The concept of two centers. A concept that Russia has vocally and consistently opposed for 20 years. The European Union has also opposed and continues to oppose it. India is also against it. Do you want to hear how it sounded in Moscow? It sounded like this. And you, yes you, nobody invited you. You weren't mentioned and nobody remembered you. Your place is somewhere, well, over there. Somewhere over there, far, far away, there, somewhere. Of course, in his speech, he portrays it differently. Xi talks about the relationship between two great powers, about partners, not opponents. But what's the point? Here he is, the very same one. He paints a world where there are two peaks and everyone else. And Xi feels very comfortable in this picture. Do you know why? Because he is one of the two peaks. I would say the second one, but it doesn't matter. One of the two. Moscow sees, Moscow understands. And Moscow, without cameras, without statements, without public protests, will look for a way to break down this structure, because this structure is burying it. Elections. He will come to Washington in September, 2 months before the midterm elections for Congress. This is not a coincidence. The September visit of the Chinese leader to the American capital. And right before the elections, this is a political signal. Yes, of course it was thought up in Trump's camp, but Xi said, okay. And its meaning is clear. China is demonstrating that it is working with the current administration, that relations are stable, that the Republican approach is yielding results. This doesn't mean China wants Republicans to win just because they're Republicans. Yes, China wants stability and predictability. And a Republican majority in Congress now means the continuation of the architecture that was just built at the meeting in Beijing. And a change in the majority means uncertainty. And uncertainty is not beneficial for China. That's why the September visit is actually the beginning of what can be called the indirect support for the Republican campaign. Not with money, not with statements, not with pictures. With a handshake. By being there. Result. What really happened? The two largest powers, military and economic, agreed on the rules of the game for the next few years. Quietly, pragmatically, without winners or losers on paper, because both sides needed to return home with dignity. The whole world watched the handshake and argued about who outplayed whom, but they already knew the answer long ago. And they weren't flying there to negotiate, but to confirm what had already been agreed upon, long before the cameras turned on and started filming. This is what real diplomacy actually is. Boring, technical, invisible, and that's exactly why it works. Friends, if you found this analysis interesting, give it a like. Share it with those who try to think for themselves, and subscribe so you don't miss out. Now let's move on. Israel. Yesterday, on Friday, an Israeli strike in Gaza eliminated Izzeddin al-Qadr, the head of Hamas's military wing, one of the last surviving architects of October 7th. Who is he? He is a person who joined Hamas back in the 1980s at its founding, a member of the Military Council, one of the organization's top military figures, one of those who directly planned and oversaw the execution of the massacre on October 7th. When Mohammed Sinwar was killed, command of the military wing passed directly to him. He was the highest-ranking military commander of Hamas to be eliminated since the U.S.-backed ceasefire last fall. Along with him, 6 people were killed in the strike, including his wife and daughter. His 2 sons were eliminated by the Israeli army earlier during the war. Why is this important, and why are we talking about this separately? Because Israel has 2 policies, 2 that never change, and which Israel's enemies have never been able to fully understand. Never leave any of their own behind, neither alive nor dead. No matter how many years pass, Israel will search, will bring back, will recover. And the second, the reverse side, the first. Not one of those who killed Yuri will remain unfound. Year 5, 20, 40. Israeli services have no statute of limitations. They have files, they have memory, they have methodical people who work for decades, and sooner or later they come. It started, if you remember, with Eichmann and all those who worked in the concentration camps. Al-Qadad lasted 2.5 years after October 7. By Israeli standards, that's a very long time. Not because they searched poorly, but because he was very well hidden. But they never stopped searching, not for a single day. This is a message to everyone who is planning the next attack. An attack can be carried out. We can't protect ourselves from everything you come up with, but you won't live long after it. Hormuz. Hormuz. What is happening today in the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman will be called hybrid warfare in future naval history textbooks. On May 8, a kamikaze drone attacked the Sanangol tanker in Namibe near the port of Minosakar. There was an explosion and an oil spill began. On the same day, Iran seized the Ocean Koi tanker, accusing it of attempting to harm Iranian exports. A little earlier, a CGM container ship was shelled, resulting in a line of wounded. The Indian vessel Haji Ali sank off the coast of Oman. The crew was rescued by the Omani Coast Guard. Off the coast of Fujairah, another vessel was seized and taken to Iranian waters. And here is something worth paying special attention to. Iran is not just seizing vessels. Iran is deliberately, let's call things by their proper names, causing an environmental disaster in the Gulf. They're spilling oil. Why, you may ask? Because Iran knows it can't close the Strait of Hormuz militarily. The American fleet is stronger. The allied fleets of the UK, France, and India are stronger. A military scenario would be suicide. But making the strait unusable, making insurance for tankers unaffordable, making every trip a lottery, that's possible. What does this mean for prices? For now, it's moderate. But if even one real spill reaches the level of a catastrophe, we will see a spike in oil prices, and God knows where it will stop. And what's important is that it won't hit America. America is its own oil supplier today. It will hit those who buy from the Middle East. And who buys the most from the Middle East in the world? This might surprise you. I mean, of course you know, but it's China. Yes, China. The very same China that just agreed with Trump in Beijing about stability. The very same China that Iran is now interfering with by its actions. The very same China, the only one that's pulling them out of the situation they're in, which you can't really talk about online. Now China has both the motive and the opportunity to quietly tell Tehran, calm down. Right now, Iran isn't showing this to us, but to China, that Iran need to be taken seriously because they have people crazy enough to do anything, so they should be given more. Do you want to see how that very pragmatic architecture we talked about above works? Here it is in action, without loud statements, without threats. It's just that 2 parties came to an agreement and the third one feels less comfortable. And he knows that he'll have to go back into hiding, so he tries his best to act tough and show what a cool guy he is. America's military hardware. And now, a topic that official broadcasts try not to highlight. America is running out of military hardware. Not oil, not dollars, but military hardware. According to an analysis conducted in Washington after last year's operation against Iran, about 45% of the precision strike missile stockpile has been used up, 50% of the THAAD missile stockpile, and about 50% of the Patriot missiles. According to the assessment of the British Royal United Services Institute, if the current rate of use of American stockpiles continues, THAAD missiles will be depleted within a month. By the way, it takes from 1 to 4 years to restore them to the current level. It will take a few more years to reach the level where they really should be. Who is to blame for this? Not yesterday and not the day before. Years of underfunding the military industry are to blame. Decades of assumptions that there would be no more major wars are to blame. To be honest, the blame also lies with that globalist mindset that believed the Iranian problem could be solved without weapons. The Russian issue was thought solvable with money, the Chinese with talks. Meanwhile, the American defense industry kept shrinking. Why? Well, first of all, to protect everyone else and to pull money out of the country and mess around there. Another reason is that social programs need to be developed, right? You can't just ignore that. Aren't you ashamed? You're taking from pregnant women and giving it to the greedy and so on. Here's another quiet outcome from Beijing. Okay, that no one talks about out loud. If America were now in a major confrontation with China, they would be left without half their missiles. And Trump knows this. And that's why in Beijing he was building an architecture of stability, not out of weakness, but from an understanding of the limited window of opportunity. American industry can urgently be switched to a military footing, like during World War II, break everything to hell and start doing what was done back then, supplying the Soviet Union, Europe, England, anyone at all, yes. But first you must break and rebuild. We need time to restore industry, to restore that very industrial replenishment capacity that all military analysts are writing about today. Numbers that scream. And the last topic is domestic American affairs. Recent polls, Washington Post, ABC, Ipsos. Record disapproval of Trump for both terms. That is, CNN reports 65% disapproval, 36% support, 58% oppose, a net negative of 22%. And according to TASS on the economy, 30% approve, 70% disapprove. On healthcare, 65% are against. On average, across all measurements, about 62% disapprove of Trump, and only 37% support him. These are the worst numbers. In his second term, these are the worst numbers, and the worst on the key issue, the economy, and on inflation, and on the cost of living. Well, as you understand, Trump is going to do something about it. He is already doing the first thing. Tariff deals with China. So you could say that the visit to China was the beginning of the Republican Party's election campaign. Tariff deals with China, easing the pressure on family budgets through prices. This is a direct response to the 70% figure on the economy. Beijing gave a tariff respite. A respite means less pressure on prices. Less pressure on prices means movement in the polls. Secondly, there will be a lot of work on the topics that appeal to the Republican electorate. The border, crime, deregulation, and reducing bureaucracy. Each decision from this list adds a few points in the polls. Third, and most importantly, there is a major factor ahead that hasn't yet shown up in any poll. By October or November, we will enter the election window. And during this window, a lot of things that are currently being kept under wraps will pour in. They're barely holding it back. They really want to show it. Documents will pour out. Investigations will pour out. Numbers will pour out. Who exactly stole how much over the past 4 years? What schemes were running inside federal programs? Who received money under the guise of fake aid? Who was behind the mass migration pipeline? Who covered it up? Who turned a blind eye? All of this is being prepared today. Some of it has already been published. Quietly, most of it is waiting for its time. And that time is autumn. Autumn. That's why we need to finish this story with Iran. I've always said, no later than the end of May. Maybe at the very, very beginning of June. But we need to finish it. I'm not a supporter of political score settling. But when the Democrats have done what they've done in recent years, and when this starts coming up again and again on the front pages for voters, there will be some very uncomfortable questions. And the Democratic majority won't have any answers. Second, 250 years of America, half a century anniversary, the main national holiday of a generation. And Trump is at the epicenter, as the main figure, as the main voice, as the one in office when the celebration happens. Whether you want it or not, the image of the country's hero at the anniversary will be created. And this image will also raise questions. Third, and this might be the main thing, Xi is coming to Washington. But he's not coming with the same scenario as when he hosted Trump in Beijing, Xi in Beijing. He comfortably played the role of one of the two poles. In Washington, they'll try to put him in a different frame. It's not two poles that make the world. And in each specific region, there's someone responsible for stopping the war. In Gaza, it's Israel and the Arab coalition. In Ukraine, it's the Europeans and Trump personally. In Korea, it's Japan and South Korea, and so on. These are two very different models. Xi is selling the division into two zones. Trump is selling regional sheriffs. And when these two models clash in Washington in September and October, it will be, in my opinion, one of the most interesting diplomatic conversations of the decade. And why do I bet on Trump's model? For one simple reason. The two-zone model is always a question. Whose zone is bigger? Where is the border? Who gave in to whom? It's a model of perpetual tension. And the model of regional powers taking responsibility is a model in which America stops being the global policeman, stops paying for other people's wars, and at the same time retains the role of arbiter, together with China. It's cheaper, it's more sustainable, it's what the American voter wants, and we'll see it this fall. Friends, that's all for today. If you found this analysis valuable, please like, share it with thoughtful people, and subscribe to the channel, and separately. For those who want to go deeper, not just watch the news, but understand the mechanics of freedom and how it works, check out my roadmap to freedom. That is, well, the roadmap to freedom in Russian. This is a step-by-step analysis of how personal freedom turns into political freedom, and vice versa. Read my book, Capitalism 1.0.1. It explains why the pragmatism of the two strongest countries, which negotiate for stability, is not capitulation, but the only way for an ordinary person to have the opportunity to plan their life. Because they have summits there, but how will that affect us? That's what interests us. And watch our morning segments. There every morning we break it down too, but briefly and from a different angle. Until next time, take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.